Tokyo Bay, May 1945. From 7 miles above the clouds, a silver shape drifts steady through thin, trembling air. Inside the glass nose of a B-29 superfortress, the bombardier leans over a strange device. A polished metal sphere mounted on gyros, lenses glittering under red instrument light. His world narrows to crosshairs, dancing over a map of smoke and fire below. The Norden Bombsight, the most guarded secret of America's air war, promises him perfection. A bomb that never misses, they said. Every mission brief repeats the same quiet faith. That mathematics could replace chaos, that war could be made precise. As he grips the release handle, numbers whirl inside the sight, wind speed and altitude aligning to an invisible equation. He breathes once and presses. Far below, a city waits, and in that instant, America's greatest promise of precision is put to the ultimate test. But to understand how such faith was born, we must return to the beginning, to an engineer, a dream, and a nation preparing for war. The idea that a single bomb could change the outcome of war was not born in battle. It was born in the quiet workshops of peacetime America. After the Great War, the U.S. military faced a truth it could not ignore. The next conflict would be fought in the air. Bombers had already proven they could reach far behind enemy lines, but the bombs they dropped were crude, their accuracy unpredictable, their destruction often wasted on empty fields. The dream of the interwar years was simple: to make bombing scientific. In 1920s America, a Dutch-born engineer named Carl Lucas Norden took that dream personally. Educated in Switzerland, meticulous in manner and faith, Norden was not a man of violence. He was a man of precision. When the U.S. Navy hired him in 1920, it wasn't for his patriotism, but for his genius with gyroscopes. His task, to build a bomb sight so accurate that a bomb could be placed in a pickle barrel from 20,000 feet. In the labs of New York's Carl L. Norden Incorporated, he began to design what few yet understood: a mechanical brain. The early prototypes looked fragile: clusters of brass gears, glass prisms, and spinning gyros, all driven by the mathematics of flight. Norden's creation would calculate in real time the variables that plagued bombardiers: wind drift, altitude, airspeed, and gravity. It promised a new kind of warfare, one that could strike without waste, without chaos. By the early 1930s, his sight began to show results. Navy test crews dropped practice bombs that landed closer than any before. In 1933, the Army Air Corps took notice. Within a few years, the Norden M-series bomb sight became the most secret device in the American arsenal. Each was locked in a safe after every mission. Bombardiers swore oaths never to reveal its workings, not even to fellow officers. As the world darkened again in the late 1930s, America's military thinkers clung to a doctrine born of optimism: precision daylight bombing. If bombers could hit a bridge, a power plant, or a shipyard with scientific accuracy, they could cripple an enemy without burning cities. The Norden sight was the key, but technology and doctrine grew together in dangerous faith. At Maxwell Field, at the Air Corps Tactical School, officers were taught that the bomber will always get through. Future generals like Haywood Hansell and Curtis LeMay learned to believe that, with the Norden, entire wars could be won from 25,000 feet. The sight was not just an instrument. It became a symbol of moral warfare. Meanwhile, the sight's design remained a national secret. Each Norden unit cost as much as a family home, around $10,000 at the time, and production was handled under heavy guard. Factories operated behind fences topped with wire. Workers were screened, sworn, and compartmentalized. Only a handful of engineers truly understood the device's heart: its spinning gyros that stabilized the viewfinder, keeping the crosshairs still even as the aircraft vibrated. By 1938, war was again spreading across Europe. In Germany, new bombers rolled from hangars under the swastika. In Japan, factories churned out Mitsubishi and Nakajima designs. America still stood apart, neutral, untested, but watching. And in secret test flights over the American desert, Norden's sight performed beautifully. Practice bombs landed within mere feet of their targets. Reports reached Washington, describing unprecedented accuracy. The promise was intoxicating. When the U.S. entered the war after Pearl Harbor, the Norden sight was already mythic. The device that would let American bombers wage a clean war, hitting factories, not families, rail yards, not homes. Each bombardier was taught that his machine gave him godlike control over chaos. But myths thrive best before they are tested. As thousands of new bombers rolled off assembly lines, B-17s, B-24s, and soon the mighty B-29 Superfortress, the Norden was fitted to each. The dream of precision warfare took flight across two oceans. The war would soon show how dreams and reality diverge, especially over a land half a world away. By 1944, the war had become global, and the air had become its most decisive battlefield. In Europe, Allied bombers darkened the skies over Germany. But across the Pacific, a different kind of war was taking shape. One that demanded distance, endurance, and a new generation of machines. The United States needed to reach Japan, a target nearly 3,000 miles from the nearest Allied base. For years, it seemed impossible. But in secret plants across Kansas and Washington, Boeing engineers were crafting the answer: the B-29 Superfortress. The B-29 was more than a bomber. It was a flying laboratory. Pressurized cabins, remote-controlled gun turrets, Wright R-3350 engines capable of lifting tons of bombs higher and farther than anything before. And at its core, mounted in the glass nose, sat the same symbol of American faith in precision: the Norden Bombsight. Strategists called it Operation Matterhorn, the first plan to strike Japan directly. In the spring of 1944, the B-29s of the XX Bomber Command began operating from remote airfields in India and advanced bases hacked from the jungles of China. Each mission was an ordeal. Fuel and bombs had to be flown over the Himalayas, the hump, in dangerous convoys. Crews faced monsoon weather, freezing altitudes, and mechanical breakdowns. Yet Washington's orders were clear: Japan's war industry must be struck. The Norden sight, built for the clear skies of Nevada and New Mexico, now faced monsoon clouds and jet stream winds that no engineer had foreseen. Bombardiers who had trained to hit within 100 feet of target circles found themselves peering through turbulence, smoke, and haze that turned the crosshairs blind. Still, the doctrine of precision persisted. General Henry Hap Arnold, commander of the Army Air Forces, believed that scientific bombing could bring Japan to its knees. The target lists were drawn: aircraft factories in Nagoya, steelworks in Yawata, arsenals in Tokyo. By late 1944, American forces captured the Mariana Islands, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. Their airfields became floating cities of steel and concrete, capable of launching 3,000-mile round trips to Japan. The WWII Bomber Command, under General Curtis LeMay, took over the campaign. Each new base brought America's precision doctrine closer to Tokyo's heart. On Tinian alone, engineers built runways so vast they could be seen from orbit today. 4 parallel strips, each 2 miles long, supporting nearly 500 B-29s. Maintenance crews lived beside the bombers in tent cities. Each morning, the sound of engines rolled across the island like thunder over the sea. Inside the operations rooms, the belief in Norden's perfection remained unshaken. Maps were covered with factory coordinates. Mathematical flight paths were drawn in colored pencil. To the men who planned these raids, war had become an equation. Altitude, speed, wind, and bomb weight, all converging to a single point on the map. But Japan was not Germany. Its cities sprawled in dense, flammable clusters. Its industry was scattered in small workshops, often hidden within residential districts. Anti-aircraft guns and night fighters defended key regions. But weather was Japan's greatest ally. The jet stream, a discovery still new to science, tore across the islands at over 200 miles per hour, scattering bomb patterns across miles. The results were sobering. Mission after mission returned with claims of success, only for reconnaissance photos to reveal near misses, empty craters, or bombs dropped miles off target. Reports to Washington grew cautious. Even the Norden, with all its gyros and equations, could not see through clouds or winds. Still, the American command clung to its faith. Each setback, they told themselves, was temporary. A matter of training, of adjustment, of experience. Precision bombing was not failing. It was being refined. By the end of 1944, over 100 B-29s stood ready on the Marianas, their bomb bays filled, their bombardiers still trusting. The small metal sphere that promised a perfect strike. The moment was coming when that promise would face its hardest test, and the world would see whether technology could truly overcome the chaos of war. To the bombardier, the Norden was more than a device. It was a burden of perfection. In the glass nose of the bomber, isolated from the rest of the crew, he sat alone with the war. Around him, the world was noise. The rumble of 4 Wright engines, the thin, vibrating metal, the hiss of oxygen masks. But in his sight, everything went silent. He was trained to trust numbers more than instinct. Before each mission, bombardiers studied target photos, wind forecasts, and altitude tables. Once over enemy territory, the pilot handed over control. Literally. Through the Norden's autopilot linkage, the bombardier could steer the bomber with minute adjustments, aligning crosshairs over the target. They were young, most in their early 20s. Each carried the myth that his sight could hit a 100-foot circle from 6 miles high. In training, they were told they held the key to victory. But in combat, nothing behaved as it did in manuals. Clouds swallowed targets. Winds shifted without warning. Flak burst around them like black blossoms, shaking the plane and blinding the optics. Yet still, they peered into the eyepiece, believing that somewhere inside the spinning gyros and ticking gears lay a kind of justice. That this war, unlike the last, could be fought cleanly, with skill instead of slaughter. After missions, crews gathered to review film from the automatic strike cameras. The images told the truth. Bombs falling wide, explosions in fields and rivers. Some bombardiers cried, others blamed the weather or fate. But all returned to their posts the next day, adjusting knobs, recalibrating hope. For them, precision was not just a tactic. It was a faith. And faith dies slowly. To understand the legend of the Norden, one must understand the machine itself. At its heart, it was an analog computer, a masterpiece of pre-digital engineering. Inside the metal housing spun a pair of gyros, stabilizing the sight so that the bombardier saw a steady image even as the aircraft shook. Beneath them, a set of cams, gears, and levers solved an equation in real time, calculating the bomb's trajectory based on airspeed, altitude, and wind drift. The bombardier input data manually, turning dials, adjusting knobs, feeding the sight the numbers it needed to predict where a bomb would land if dropped at that instant. When everything aligned, a small light blinked in the eyepiece, the moment of release. It was an instrument of immense craftsmanship, more than 2,000 precision parts assembled by hand. The optics were ground to micrometer tolerances. So sensitive was the device that even a drop of oil out of place could ruin its calibration. To military planners, it represented the pinnacle of American industry, a union of science and faith in machinery. But the Norden's power came with fragility. It required stable flight, clear vision, and meticulous data entry. In the calm air of training fields, it was a marvel. In the chaos of combat, it was exposed, shaken by turbulence, clouded by frost, confused by shifting winds. The sight could compute flawlessly, but only with perfect information. And in war, information was never perfect. Despite this, its legend grew. The Army Air Forces guarded its design as zealously as the Manhattan Project. If a bomber were shot down, bombardiers were ordered to destroy their Norden with a thermite grenade. None could fall into enemy hands. The sight symbolized more than technology. It embodied America's conviction that intellect could tame destruction. In an age when nations fought with fire, the Norden promised control. But control, like clarity, fades at altitude. The Norden's invention shaped an entire strategy. Daylight precision bombing. Before the war, theorists argued that nations could be defeated not by destroying armies, but by dismantling their ability to wage war. Factories, refineries, and rail hubs, these were the arteries of modern conflict. If they could be struck with surgical accuracy, victory could come without the slaughter of civilians. Europe was the proving ground. The U.S. 8th Air Force, flying from England, put the doctrine to the test against Germany. Daylight raids, tight formations, high altitudes. Each bomber carrying a Norden, each bombardier guided by math. The results were mixed. While the sight worked under clear skies, fog and flak often turned precision into probability. Yet the concept endured, and by 1944 it was carried across the Pacific. Japan became the final laboratory of this doctrine. The island's cities were mapped, their industries categorized into targets: aircraft plants in Nagoya, steelworks in Kobe, docks in Yokohama. Commanders believed that, with the Norden, they could cripple Japan's war effort without repeating the indiscriminate bombings seen in Europe. The B-29 was the perfect vessel for this vision. Its pressurized cabin allowed high-altitude flight above most defenses. Its long range made Tokyo reachable. The combination of B-29 and Norden seemed unstoppable, a scientific weapon married to a scientific strategy. But precision bombing was built on assumptions: stable weather, visible targets, predictable winds. Over Japan, those assumptions failed. The high jet stream twisted bomb trajectories, thick cloud layers obscured targets, humidity fogged lenses. Crews struggled to find their marks. Each pickle barrel promise vanished into haze and guesswork. Still, reports were written in confident language. Success rates were rounded upward. Commanders still spoke of precision attacks. But among the crews, faith was quietly faltering. The Norden could calculate perfectly, but it could not command the sky. And soon, leaders would face the truth. When precision failed, only destruction remained. In Washington, the Norden was more than a weapon. It was a political promise. For General Henry Hap Arnold, head of the Army Air Forces, it represented proof that air power could win wars independently. The Norden sight gave substance to that doctrine, a tangible symbol of science conquering chaos. Arnold's staff quoted statistics from test ranges and field trials: 20-foot accuracy at 20,000 feet. They believed it. Every report sent upward reassured the command that daylight precision bombing was working. In wartime bureaucracy, optimism had momentum. Failures were attributed to weather, mechanical error, or crew inexperience, never the theory itself. On the other side of the Pacific, General Curtis LeMay, commanding 20th Kike, Deuteriborn Bomber Command, inherited both the Norden and the faith surrounding it. LeMay was not a dreamer. He was a realist, cold, methodical, and ruthless. But even he began the Marianas Campaign with the doctrine intact. The first raids on Tokyo and Nagoya were flown high, in daylight, each bombardier peering through a Norden sight calibrated to perfection. The results were dismal. Of hundreds of tons of bombs dropped, barely a fraction hit industrial targets. The rest scattered across fields and rivers. Reconnaissance photos told the truth. No report could soften. LeMay faced a choice: cling to the ideal of precision or adapt to the reality of war. He did not hesitate. In March 1945, he ordered a shift to low-altitude nighttime incendiary raids, abandoning the Norden's precision for sheer destructiveness. It was a decision that changed the war and shattered the illusion of perfect bombing. Yet even as Tokyo burned, official briefings still invoked the Norden. In propaganda films and training manuals, it remained the face of American ingenuity. The myth survived its own obsolescence. For Japan, the Norden was a rumor carried on the wind. Captured intelligence reports spoke of a secret American device that made bombs fall with mathematical accuracy. Japanese engineers dismissed it as exaggerated. Yet their air defenses were built with caution. Searchlights and anti-aircraft batteries ringed Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, and Kobe. The Imperial Japanese Army Air Service fielded interceptors, Nakajima, Ki-43s, and Kawasaki, Kai-61s, to climb toward the silver intruders that appeared above 25,000 feet. But Japan's greatest defense was the sky itself. Winter brought cloud banks so thick they hid entire cities. The Pacific's moisture warped optics, froze lenses, and fogged glass. Even when the bombers broke through, the jet stream, unknown to Allied planners before 1944, tore bomb patterns apart. Bomb sites like the Norden, calibrated for steady air, could not compensate for winds that shifted by the second. Japanese spotters often watched American bombs fall harmlessly into rivers or farmland miles from target zones. Yet, when they did hit, when the crosshairs found their mark, the destruction was surgical. A single accurate strike could obliterate an engine plant or oil refinery vital to the war effort. By early 1945, the Japanese government understood the threat was not the Norden's accuracy, but America's persistence. Hundreds of bombers came each night, whether they hit or missed. Precision had given way to saturation. The fires that swept Tokyo and Yokohama were not guided by optics, but by inevitability. Still, to the Japanese public, the unerring American bomb sight became a symbol of fear. A machine that saw through clouds, a weapon guided by cold science. In truth, its power was less mechanical than psychological. The belief in its perfection did what the device itself could not. It broke morale. The Norden bombsight was not just a piece of glass and metal, it was a story. From the first newsreels, America portrayed it as the ultimate instrument of precision. Wartime posters showed bombardiers calmly aligning their crosshairs, striking only military targets. Films like Target for Today and The Memphis Belle turned the bombsight into a symbol of virtue, proof that America fought with conscience, not cruelty. Journalists were told that the site made bombers surgical tools of war. Crews were forbidden to discuss its workings, but encouraged to praise its results. Even President Franklin D. Roosevelt was briefed that America possessed a weapon so accurate it can drop a bomb into a pickle barrel. The phrase became legend, but on the ground, in the smoking ruins of Dresden, Nagoya, and Tokyo, the illusion faded. Bombing, no matter how precise in design, was never precise in effect. The Norden was capable of remarkable accuracy under ideal conditions, but war offered few of those. Statistically, even in clear daylight, only about 20% of bombs fell within 1,000 feet of their target. The moral comfort that technology once provided began to crumble. When LeMay's incendiary raids burned 16 square miles of Tokyo in one night, no sight guided those bombs. Only fire and fear. The age of precision had given birth to the age of total destruction. Yet after the war, the legend endured. Newspapers and films continued to describe the Norden as the bomb that never missed. Its name became shorthand for ingenuity, for the idea that America's wars could be fought cleanly. Few cared that reality had been messier. The myth had already served its purpose, to make destruction seem rational. And so, as the last missions over Japan approached, the bomb sight still sat in the nose of every B-29, its gyros humming, its optics polished. A relic of faith still carried into a world of fire. March 9, 1945. The night Tokyo burned. But months before that inferno, American commanders still believed that technology could win the war from the sky. The Norden Bombsight, the secret eye of precision, was at the center of that belief. In early 1944, the B-29 Superfortress began its combat testing in the China-Burma-India theater. The 20th Air Force was assembled under the ambitious directive of General Henry Hap Arnold to strike Japan directly. Yet the range of Japan's home islands was beyond reach of any Allied base, except through the massive logistical feat of supplying B-29s from India, over the Himalayas, to China. Those first raids were not just tests of aircraft and courage. They were trials for the Norden Bombsight itself. The engineers in Dayton and the bombardiers trained in Albuquerque had promised pickle-barrel accuracy, the ability to drop a bomb through a 100-foot circle from 20,000 feet. On paper, it was science perfected. In the skies over Japan, it was another story. In June 1944, the first raid against the Yawata Steel Works was launched from Chinese bases. 60 B-29s roared across the night sky, a technological armada embodying years of engineering and faith. But the results were humbling. Only one bomb hit the target complex. The rest scattered over miles. Clouds, flak, poor visibility, and the bitter truth that no sight, no matter how advanced, could outmatch weather and wind. Still, belief persisted. "Precision bombing will break Japan," Arnold declared. "The Norden will prove it." The U.S. built entire wings around this ideal. Bombardiers treated their sights as sacred, locking them away between missions, saluting them before flight, adjusting gyros and stabilizers with surgical care. In their eyes, the Norden wasn't just an instrument. It was the promise that the war could be fought humanely, surgically, with science instead of slaughter. Then came Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, the Marianas. By late 1944, the dream of precision bombing gained a new stage. The Pacific Islands gave the U.S. its final springboard, just 1,500 miles from Tokyo. From these volcanic runways, the B-29s of the Extekun Bomber Command would finally strike the Japanese heartland with full strength. The first major mission from the Marianas came on November 24, 1944. Target: the Musashino aircraft plant in Tokyo, home to Key Engine, production for Japan's fighters. Colonel Emmett Rosie O'Donnell led 111 B-29s across 1,500 miles of ocean, at altitudes above 30,000 feet. The Norden Bombsight was aligned for daylight precision. The results, however, shocked even the optimists. Only 48 bombers reached the target area through clouds. Of those, analysis showed that less than 5% of bombs landed within 1,000 feet of the target. Many fell in rice fields and suburbs. Japanese records later confirmed the Musashino plant remained largely intact. American intelligence officers studied film reels and shook their heads. The Norden, they realized, could not pierce through smoke, wind shear, or cloud. Its gyroscopic stabilization, while revolutionary, was still vulnerable to turbulence. Bombers at 30,000 feet in jet stream winds, unknown phenomena at the time, were missing by miles. But orders persisted. The belief in precision had become doctrine. Through December and January, B-29 raids continued. Nagoya, Osaka, Kobe. Results were mixed. For every target hit, 10 went astray. The moral calculus began to shift. Inside the Norden's optical system, the crosshairs still glowed, fixed on coordinates, obedient to its equations. But outside, the world moved unpredictably. Bombardiers fought the instruments, recalibrating constantly as winds drove them off course. They prayed that each adjustment, each twist of the knob, would redeem the myth they carried. Still, accuracy data told a colder truth. Reports from the 313th Wing showed that fewer than 10% of bombs fell within 1,000 feet of the aiming point. The pickle barrel dream, in reality, was a wide circle of destruction. Yet one commander refused to give up. Major General Curtis LeMay arrived in the Marianas in January 1945. Known for his bluntness and ruthless efficiency, LeMay reviewed Norden results with grim clarity. He understood what others whispered. That weather, not will, was defeating precision. He made a decision that would change everything. If technology couldn't bring accuracy from the stratosphere, perhaps humanity's raw fire could do it from below. And so, as February passed, the doctrine of daylight precision began to die. In its place, a darker strategy emerged, one that would abandon the Norden's promise altogether. The precision era was ending, and the firestorm era was about to begin. By March 1945, the war in the Pacific had entered its final ruthless phase. Japan's cities stood within reach of the B-29s now operating freely from the Marianas. But for General Curtis LeMay, the promise of precision had already been tested and broken. LeMay ordered an investigation into bombing accuracy. His analysts compiled thousands of bomb strike photographs. The results were brutal. Out of every 100 bombs dropped by high-altitude daylight raids, only about 5 landed within a quarter-mile of the aiming point. In many cases, entire formations had missed industrial zones altogether. The Norden Bombsight, when used under ideal test conditions, had been capable of remarkable accuracy. But in combat, the skies were never ideal. Winds exceeding 150 miles per hour, unpredictable jet streams, freezing cockpits, and drifting cloud banks all turned precision into chance. Even the slightest turbulence could throw off a bomb sight calibrated to fractions of a degree. The dream of surgical warfare, guided by the Norden's mechanical eye, was slipping into the fog. LeMay's solution was as radical as it was pragmatic. He stripped the B-29s of their defensive guns to reduce weight, loaded them with incendiaries instead of high-explosive bombs, and ordered them to fly low, at 5,000 to 8,000 feet, under the clouds that had blinded the Norden. The date was set, March 9, 1945. The target, Tokyo. That night, 334 B-29s roared off the runways of Tinian and Saipan. Each carried 7 tons of napalm and magnesium incendiaries. Their Norden sights, though still on board, would serve no purpose. Crews released bombs visually, guided by the glow of the first fires below. In just 2 hours, Tokyo was engulfed in an ocean of flame. Wooden neighborhoods ignited like dry leaves. Winds turned the city into a firestorm. More than 16 square miles were destroyed. Over 100,000 people perished. It was the deadliest air raid in human history. The Norden Bombsight, once hailed as a weapon of precision, had been silenced by the scale of destruction it was meant to prevent. After the raid, LeMay wrote to Washington, "Our results tonight speak for themselves." His message was not triumph, but inevitability. The United States had discovered that no amount of precision could overcome nature and chaos. If the Norden could not end the war cleanly, then fire would. In the weeks that followed, LeMay's B-29s burned 67 Japanese cities. Osaka, Kobe, Nagoya, Yokohama, all turned to ash. Bombardiers still manned their stations, but their sacred instruments remained idle. What had begun as a scientific quest for accuracy became an industrial campaign of annihilation. And yet, the Norden story did not vanish entirely. For every city consumed, engineers continued to gather data. Charts of altitude, wind, drift, and impact. They sought to quantify failure, to understand why an instrument of such complexity had faltered. The answer, ultimately, lay in the nature of war itself. The Norden was not a lie. It was a promise too fragile for the world it entered. Its gyros could stabilize a site, but not the chaos of weather or fear. Its optics could pierce the clouds, but not the moral haze that followed. By mid-1945, even as Japan neared collapse, the Norden's reputation lived on in propaganda. American newsreels continued to call it the bomb sight that will win the war. Few knew that its most decisive missions were carried out without it. The final irony came with the ultimate weapon, the atomic bomb. On August 6, 1945, the Enola Gay lifted off from Tinian carrying Little Boy. Its bombardier, Major Thomas Farabee, used a Norden Bombsight to release the bomb over Hiroshima. His drop was nearly perfect, detonation within 800 feet of the intended aim point. For a moment, the myth was reborn. The Norden had finally hit its mark. But the precision of that drop only amplified its moral weight. The device that had promised humane warfare ended up guiding the most destructive weapon ever created. In the clean geometry of its crosshairs, a city vanished. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the war ended within days. Yet among those who had trusted the Norden, bombardiers, engineers, generals, there remained an unease. They had witnessed both the height of technology and the depth of consequence. The Norden bombsight had been built to make war rational. In the end, it revealed how war defies reason itself. Its crosshairs faded into history, replaced by radar, by computers, by missiles that would one day guide themselves. But for a brief moment in the skies over Japan, humanity looked through a lens and believed it could control destruction. It learned otherwise. The sky was quiet now, but the question lingered. What had all that precision truly achieved? In the weeks following the Tokyo firebombing, the statistics began to tell the story that words could not. Between March and August 1945, US B-29s dropped more than 160,000 tons of bombs on Japan. 67 cities were hit. 40% of Japan's urban area was reduced to rubble. Civilian casualties were staggering. Over 500,000 killed. Nearly 5 million made homeless. The official reports from the 20th Air Force documented the most effective campaign of aerial bombardment ever conducted. But behind those numbers, there was a quieter reckoning. The promise of precision, once measured in yards and feet, had dissolved into miles and megatons. Analysts compared mission data. During the high-altitude precision raids of late 1944, less than 10% of bombs fell within 1,000 feet of their targets. After LeMay's shift to low-altitude incendiary attacks, the destruction rate per ton of bomb increased nearly tenfold. The conclusion was undeniable. Accuracy had failed, but effectiveness, in the cold language of military efficiency, had been achieved. Still, for the men who had spent years perfecting the Norden bombsight, the numbers felt hollow. In a 1946 report, a former Norden engineer wrote, "Our sight worked. It was the air, the earth, and the chaos that didn't." Even among air crews, disillusionment was spreading. Many bombardiers had joined the Air Corps, believing the Norden would make bombing humane, that by striking only military targets, they could shorten the war without mass killing. But as they watched cities like Tokyo, Nagoya, and Osaka vanish in fire, that belief collapsed. Lieutenant John Henry, a B-29 bombardier from the 314th Wing, later said in an interview, "We were told we could drop a bomb through a pickle barrel. I remember looking down and seeing nothing but fire. You couldn't tell where the factories ended and the homes began." Even so, command evaluations praised the Norden's contribution. Official Air Force assessments credited the bombsight with providing the foundation of America's precision bombing doctrine. Its mechanical sophistication, a combination of gyroscopic stabilization, analog computation, and optical targeting, represented a triumph of engineering. In the European theater, where weather conditions were sometimes more favorable, the Norden had indeed shown remarkable performance. Over Germany, under clear skies and coordinated formations, U.S. 8th Air Force bombardiers achieved consistent accuracy against industrial targets like Schweinfurt and Regensburg. Yet even there, combat reports acknowledged that precision was a relative term. Circular error probable. The radius within which half of all bombs landed often exceeded 1,000 feet. The discrepancy between laboratory precision and battlefield chaos became a central topic in post-war analyses. A U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey, USSBS, concluded bluntly, "The Norden Bombsight was the best optical device of its kind ever developed. But weather, enemy defense, and human limitation rendered its promise of pinpoint bombing largely theoretical." This was not a condemnation. It was an acknowledgement of reality. The Norden had advanced the science of bombing beyond anything the world had seen. Yet it could not overcome the unpredictable nature of war. As Japan surrendered in August 1945, the Norden's role faded quietly from headlines. Wartime secrecy still surrounded it. Every bombardier had sworn an oath never to reveal its details. Crews had been instructed to destroy the site if captured, even to shoot it if necessary. Many did not know that thousands of Norden units were now stored in warehouses, waiting for dismantling or repurposing. Still, in military circles, discussions had already begun. What had gone wrong? Was the failure in design or in doctrine? Could precision ever be achieved in war? Or was it an illusion born of hope and math? For a generation of engineers, the Norden's mixed legacy would become a blueprint for what came next. The next generation of bombs that would no longer rely on a human hand to guide them. But before the world would look ahead to guided weapons, it had to reckon with the human cost left behind by the Norden's dream, a dream that had turned into fire. When the war ended, the Norden Bombsight was still classified as one of America's most closely guarded technological secrets. Every bombardier had sworn to protect its design, and the government treated it with the same security level as the Manhattan Project. Each site was serial numbered, tracked, and stored in secure facilities. Yet by 1946, the aura of secrecy began to fade. With the war over, military analysts and engineers began declassifying reports. The myth of the bomb that never missed was quietly dismantled by data and experience. Still, the Norden's legacy was not failure. It was transformation. In the laboratories of the newly formed U.S. Air Force, engineers pored over the Norden's analog computer, its tiny gears, gyros, and ballistics tables. They realized that the site's real breakthrough wasn't its promise of accuracy, but the idea of automation. It could calculate trajectory, airspeed, wind drift, and target movement all at once, a mechanical brain decades ahead of its time. This concept would become the foundation for post-war innovation. Radar-guided bombs, electronic navigation systems, and, eventually, the first cruise missiles. In many ways, the Norden was the ancestor of smart weaponry, the first attempt to let machines think in fractions of a second during battle. But beyond the engineering, the Norden carried a deeper lesson. It revealed the limits of technology in the face of human ambition. The U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey, completed in 1947, made a chilling observation. No matter how precise the instrument, the destruction of war remains indiscriminate. The promise of control over violence is itself an illusion. Even as that report circulated through military offices, public memory told a different story. To the American people, the Norden remained a symbol of ingenuity and victory. Newsreels called it the bombsight that won the war. Its inventor, Carl Norden, a devout engineer who refused to profit excessively from his work, became a quiet legend. He had built the bombsight not for fame, but for faith, a belief that precise bombing could spare lives by shortening war. In the early Cold War years, the Norden saw new life. Modified versions were fitted into the B-47 and early B-52 bombers before electronic targeting systems made them obsolete. Some remained in service into the Korean War, where they again faced the same truths: clouds, wind, and uncertainty. By the 1960s, the Norden was officially retired, yet its spirit lived on, not just in machinery, but in mindset. The idea that technology could make warfare clean, efficient, and morally contained became part of modern military thought. From Vietnam's smart bombs to the precision missiles of the Gulf War, the dream endured. Every generation believed that its new tools would finally deliver the precision the Norden had promised. But the shadow of that promise remained. Each time a bomb missed, each time civilians suffered, history seemed to echo the same lesson from the 1940s skies. Precision is not perfection. It is only belief shaped by machinery. In museums today, the Norden Bombsight sits encased in glass, polished and still, its bronze dials frozen mid-calculation. Visitors see an artifact of genius, a relic of an age when analog gears sought to measure chaos. Few realize that, for those who once looked through its glass, the sight was not a museum piece, but a moral mirror. It showed what mankind could build and what it could destroy in the same breath. The Norden story did not end with the last bomb dropped over Japan. It carried forward into every system that claimed to bring precision to destruction. It asked one final question of history. If we can aim perfectly, can we also judge perfectly what we aim at? And that question, unanswered, would define the next era of warfare. The war was over, but its reflection, the balance between invention and responsibility, had only just begun. In the end, the Norden Bombsight was more than a machine. It was a symbol of faith in precision, a belief that mathematics could discipline the chaos of war. It embodied humanity's yearning to make destruction rational, to turn bombing into something measured, moral, and almost merciful. But history proved otherwise. In the crucible of real combat, amid clouds, wind, fear, and fire, no equation could hold. The Norden's gears spun faithfully, its gyros hummed, its crosshairs steadied. Yet the world beneath it remained uncontrollable. The line between factory and home blurred, between soldier and civilian vanished. For all its brilliance, the bombsight taught a quiet truth. Technology may enhance our reach, but it cannot purify our intent. The pursuit of accuracy became its own illusion, a moral refuge for those who wanted to believe that precision could make war humane. Carl Norden had once said that his invention would save lives by saving waste. Instead, it became part of a campaign that consumed entire cities. And still, the world did not turn away from the promise it represented. Each new generation of engineers inherited the same conviction, that the next device, the next system, the next algorithm would finally make war clean. Yet the lesson of the Norden endures precisely because it failed. It reminds us that precision without understanding is only another form of blindness, the kind that measures everything, but sees nothing. In those cold bomb bays, the bombardier's hand once rested on the control wheel, eyes fixed through glass, heart steady in the illusion of certainty. Below, a world waited, unseen, unmeasured, human. The Norden bombsight never missed, because it was never truly the bombsight that mattered. It was us, our belief that we could control destruction, that missed the mark. And that, perhaps, is the quiet legacy of the weapon once called the bomb that never missed.